I was raised in a pastor's home. I'm married to a pastor, and I am a pastor. I've experienced hurt through criticism, rejection, and the way people have treated my children. We will be discussing these subjects and so much more right here on Silently Bleeding, Finding Hope for the Pastor's Wife. Thank you so much for joining us on Silently Bleeding, Hope for the Pastor's Wife. Today I have my precious friend Sheri Holley with us. Hi, Sheri.
Hi, Jan.
So I'm going to ask her a few questions so we can just get to know her, and then we're going to get down to some nitty-gritty ministry talk.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Sheri, how long have you been married?
We've been married 40 years this December. We will have been involved in full-time ministry together for 38 of those 40 years, and I don't feel that old at all.
You don't look that old.
Well, you're being very gracious. I hang out with young-looking friends. That's
You're so sweet. Okay, so you've been married almost 40 years and in ministry 38.
Mm-hmm.
What is one of your most favorite things about being in full-time ministry?
Oh, I love being able to be part of people's lives on a more intimate level, and you know how it is. When you're with people for a long time, you're there for their wedding, you're there for their children coming along, you're part of loss and grief, and then joy again. So I like that an awful lot, being able to journey with people.
What is one of the most difficult things about being a pastor's wife?
Being deeply involved in people's lives. The blessing can get pushed out of balance sometimes, and I found that when I try to take on their difficulties and I get tied in thinking I can fix something, that's not what I'm called to do. I'm called to journey beside them and point them to Christ, and of course He's the only one that can do something for them. The burden is not mine to carry. I'm just on the journey with them, and so I have to remind myself of that pretty often.
Okay. So if there is a young pastor's wife that's watching right now, Sheri, what is one piece of advice you would like to give to her?
Oh, I would really encourage, I wish someone had said to me, develop a good, healthy friendship outside of your congregation. Find a friend who is also involved in ministry, someone who is at your same stage of life, and then a friend. I did have this opportunity. I would develop friendships with women who were a little further down the road than myself, and I would watch and see, okay, who do I want to emulate? What do I see things in their family that I would like for my family?
That's good.
And so those friendships become such a blessing, and I think they're much safer than. It's always good to have friends that are within the congregation, but those deep friendships where you're able to pour your heart out, those are best, I think, outside your congregation. And then that way, should the Lord call you away from that area, you still have those friendships all through the years.
So, Sheri, if you could change one thing in the past about your ministry, what would that one thing be?
Oh my, Jan. I think there's a list, but I think probably the biggest thing I wish I had known earlier was that it's okay. Be at peace. Salvation for the world is the job of Christ, not the job of Sheri. And working with people and feeling a need to make everything just right for them, that's not my job. That's not my calling. I do the very best I can. I love on people the best I can, but I'm never going to be able to make people happy, especially people that are just determined to not be happy. And
That's good.
That's not our job, is it, as
No.
a pastor's wife? As a young pastor's wife, that's not your job, sweetheart. Let me just set you free.
Yes, I wish I would have had a Sheri in my life when I was starting out in ministry.
Oh, that's why I say to young ministers' wives, find somebody older than yourself who can talk to you honestly about these things. And that's why this is such a great great thing. What you're doing, Jan, is such a marvelous thing, because then the young pastors' wives can plug in at their convenience and as they can.
Right, right. I will leave my email address down below if you have questions or comments. I do not know all the answers, but I do have a lifetime of experience. So if there's anything I can, help you with, I can for sure pray for you. Just let me know.
Yes.
So Sheri, as I was praying about this ministry, this online presence for pastors' wives, God gave me the name Silently Bleeding, Hope for the Pastor's Wife. And if you could share a time in your life that you don't mind sharing, that is a time you felt like you were inwardly just hurting so desperately that you would say you were silently bleeding. Could you share a story about that?
Yes, I think, and I have permission from my husband to share this, Jan.
That's wise.
Yeah. Never tell a story without permission, that's for sure. When Frank and I had been in ministry for 10 years, and we were coming up, we had just passed our 10th anniversary, and my young husband was just so driven. He was such a hard worker. I was a hard worker and volunteering in the church, and we had 3 little girls who were just a few months old, and then 2 years old and 4 years old, and it was a tough season. And the more we did, he and I both became performance-based. We really enjoyed the pat on the back. Oh, good job. Nobody can make it happen like you can. And that was especially feeding a place in my husband's heart. And so he just kept working longer and longer hours. And it got to the point that we were starting to struggle. Our marriage was struggling, and while divorce was never an option for us, our marriage just was not thriving. And I couldn't go to, we were associate pastors at the time, and I couldn't go to the lead pastor and say to him, my husband is working 80 hours a week. Are you aware of that? Because that wasn't my place, I didn't have that voice, and I couldn't say to everybody else around him, please leave him alone and let him get his work done so he can come home. And one Sunday morning, I got up around 5, must have been about 5 o'clock, and he was getting ready to leave. He was already dressed and ready to head out the door. And I looked up at him. I'm sitting in the bathroom while he's finishing getting ready, and I looked up at him and I said, are you having an affair?
Oh, wow.
And he said, no. And he stopped and looked right in my eyes. He said, what would make you say such a thing? And I said, I just had the most vivid dream. I dreamed that you were having an affair, and everyone around us knew it, but I didn't.
Wow.
And I said, tell me the truth. And I knew from his response that he was not having an affair, but anytime I've had a vivid dream, I try to listen and pray over that thing and say, okay, God, what are you trying to tell me? And several weeks later, I realized my young husband was having an affair, but it was with the church. And whereas I felt like I would have known how to respond if he was having an affair with a woman, I didn't know what do I do? This is our calling. This is our livelihood.
It's your life.
Yes. I feel called to this as well. If he were struggling with alcohol, I'd pour out all the alcohol and he'd stay away from the bar, but how do you manage that when it's the church? And after prayer and fasting, God graciously led us to a counseling service in Ohio called Emerge Ministries.
I've heard of Emerge Ministries.
Yeah, it's a powerful ministry, and they have counselors on site who have been pastors, and they understand the unique struggles of the ministry. And so our church graciously sent us paid for us to go, paid for the counseling, and we went 3 times over the course of a year, and got our marriage back on track.
Wow.
But I
Praise
would
God.
just encourage any young pastor's wife, don't just muscle through that. Reach out and get some help. That's the wisest thing to do.
And the enemy makes us feel like, oh, you can't tell anybody.
Right.
And that is his biggest trick. But no, we must reach out. We desperately, if we need help, we would tell anybody else, oh, get help.
Right.
But we feel like, oh, we can't. But
No.
we really should.
Yes, absolutely. For the longevity of it.
Yes.
Don't let the enemy pull the joy out of your marriage, or I didn't want my children growing up hating God because God had taken their daddy away from them.
Oh, that's good. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story, Sheri.
Sure. Hopefully it'll be a help and an encouragement.
Sheri, this has been so enlightening. Before we go, do you have maybe a humorous story from ministry in your life you could share?
Oh, my word, dozens. But the one that I thought about for today was we were pioneering a church on the coast of North Carolina. And it was a rural community and a very small. And our district leadership came to preach for us on this particular Sunday, and I wanted them to feel honored, so I was going to prepare a meal in our home and have them to our home because the local restaurant wasn't that fabulous. And oh, they were so appreciative and kind as I told them, well, we're just going to go back to our house and have roast. Well, my mother-in-law was also visiting, who's a wonderful lady, and I love her dearly, and she loves me, and we were having a great visit, but I just kept putting extra carrots and potatoes in the crock pot because I wanted to make sure that we had enough for everybody. Well, imagine my shock when we pulled up into the parsonage, and I had left church early to get home, and Mom was coming with me. She was going to help, and had the table all set. We were good to go. I opened the door, and the air conditioning had gone off. Now, this is a beach community, and it's about 95 degrees outside, and so my sweet little mother, who's from North Carolina and loves for me to imitate her accent, she said, "Sheri, whatever are you going to do, honey? It's hot as can be in here." And so I said, "We're okay. Open the windows." We got all the fans going, and I had 10 minutes yet before they would get there, and so we were going to have the house cooled down. It was going to be great. Well, then I go over to put the roast on the platter, and because I had put too many carrots and potatoes in, trying to make sure I had enough, the lid had not sealed on the roast.
Oh, no.
And so the roast was not cooked. And so I have to turn on the oven in this house where the air conditioner's not working, throw the roast into the oven, and my mother-in-law comes running in. She said, they're here. And I said, all right, here's the iced tea. You keep them in the living room while I'm trying to get this roast to cook in the oven in the sweltering kitchen. And then my husband came in just a minute. I'm working as best I can. He comes in and he goes, sweetheart, our guests have to be at the next church early, and they have a 2-hour drive. How long is it going to take to get dinner on the table? Well, needless to say, we all sat around patting our foreheads politely with napkins as we ate the slightly undercooked roast and crunchy potatoes and carrots. But we had a great time, made a memory.
Aw. And I'm sure they probably went away laughing, thinking, oh, that poor young pastor's wife.
That was it. That was it. We have laughed about it together through the years when we get back with them.
Oh, that's neat. Well, Sheri, thank you so much for joining me today. And I know I don't even have to ask you to be praying for the precious pastors' wives that's going to watch this. I know God's going to use you to make a difference in their lives today.
Well, praise God.
So thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for watching Silently Bleeding, Finding Hope for the Pastor's Wife. I look forward to connecting with you. Feel free to leave me comments down below, and make sure and subscribe. If you want to know every time a new video is coming out, hit the bell. I would be so delighted if you would also hit the like button, and feel free to share this video with anyone you know that this would encourage. Blessings, my friend.